entanglement between the pairs of characters. What do you make of that?
Go ahead, Rob.
It's actually interesting to me that in both of those cases, they do make the decision that the person wants them to make.
Yep.
Right?
That's true.
Like, Quill pulls the trigger, and Wanda destroys the stone. It just doesn't matter.
It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just doesn't work the way that they hoped. So, yeah, I mean, it does kind of feel like it wipes out the intention on both sides, right? Like it just made it inconsequential. But, you know, I think it does tell us something about the characters that when it did come down to it, they were willing to make that hard decision.
Yeah. Yep. That's I think that's a good point.
Well, I think even
now,
if
they
you
probably
wanna,
could have.
if you
I was
if
going
you
to say
want,
they probably could have saved a lot of trouble by making the hard decision a little earlier. But...
Right.
maybe, I mean, if you want to take even a step further, one of the things that I think is worth pulling out from both of those scenarios is sometimes, you know, in actual life, we end up in places where we find that making the right decision doesn't actually work out the way it's quote unquote supposed to or we wanted to. And I know that, you know, previously, you know, John and I have had conversations about how one of the great things about these movies is it allows us to admit openly and honestly, because the characters show us as such, that sometimes life is just plain hard.
Yeah.
And there are no good options.
Yep. Well, okay, no, I'm not going to do that. I was about to make an election joke about no good options, but we won't do that.
Yeah. I think maybe just to get a little bit more, I thought that I wasn't super compelled by the Wanda and Vision stuff, maybe because it just showed up in this movie. I think that you get a little bit of it in Civil War, but at the same time, they end up on opposite sides of that conflict. So, I don't know, like... The whole part of it, like the will she do it, won't she do it, just I feel like it dragged on a little bit too much, and it was a relationship that I don't really care that much about.
Yeah.
But
it definitely wasn't as difficult for me to buy that relationship, knowing what I know about how rich and interesting it is in the comics. Mm-hmm. And so I'm willing to infer a lot that we just don't see, and believe that there's a lot more going on there that they just don't have time to put on the screen. And I think that, you know, even though we don't have all of the answers and we don't have a full orbed view of what their relationship is about, I think that it does work when they're on the screen together. I think they have really good chemistry, and man, like at the end when he is finally able to convince her to destroy the Mind Stone, and he calls back to what she said to him, you know, when she's, you know, reading the stone when they're together in Scotland, and she says, "I just feel you," you know, and then he says at the end, you know, you could never hurt me. I just feel you. Like that. Mm-hmm. That was a seriously resonant, emotional moment for me.
Yeah, I guess that part just didn't land as much with me, and maybe it's just because of my lack of familiarity with them in the comics. But no, I get it. I mean, you're not going to get everything in this one movie. Right. I was really kind of hoping that we would get a little bit more Captain America in this movie too. Like, we get a lot of Captain America fighting, but kind of everything else is just him shouting directives at people. So, yeah, it's I think we're gonna get a lot more of Cap in the upcoming movie, which I'm looking forward to, because, you know, I like me some Captain America.
You know what? And I think that, and Aaron, I know that you have said that that you consider Black Widow to be the most interesting character in the MCU.
I have said that, yes.
I have to cordially disagree, and I think that in terms of when you compare the character arcs of the characters who have had like entire film franchises to themselves, you've got 3 Thor movies, and you've got 3 Iron Man movies, and you've got 3 Captain America movies.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, like hands down, the best character arc among those 3 belongs to Captain America.
Having discussed 2 of the 3 Captain America movies with you, I can totally see that, and I think maybe if we had been given even more time with Natasha to dig into her character, then, maybe there would be more there. Because even I'll admit that I don't feel like there was much in terms of development for her in this film. And so I don't know where she's going to go and what they're going to do. But based on everything I've seen of her so far, I still think that she is, at the very least, one of, if not the most interesting character, because of where she starts and where she ends up, at least kind of at the end of Civil War, where she's kind of the link between the 2 teams, knowing what we know about where she started way back with the flashbacks in Age of Ultron and stuff. But I can totally see where you're coming from with Cap, considering everything we know about him.
Yeah. The one last thing that I want to mention of things that sort of ended up not really making great sense to me, and this sort of ends up like being a criticism of everything that has to do with the search for the Infinity Stones. Why did Thanos even bother with indirectly seeking the stones in the first place? Because he seems to be a very, very efficient stone getter.
I think that without the power of the, all of the other Infinity Stones, like he's already been kind of carrying out his mandate planet to planet, it sounds like.
Well, sure, but I mean, if we look at how this all went down, Thanos gave Loki the scepter that had the Mind Stone in it. So he had the Mind Stone at some point in his possession. And
Did that not come from the Tesseract? Was that?
No, it's the space.
No,
the
Tesseract was Space Stone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, he obviously was able to wrest the Power Stone from the Nova Corps without the aid of any of the other stones, because that's the first one that he had.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in retrospect, it makes all of the intricate manipulation make a little bit less sense, given how effectively he is able on his own to attain all of the stones.
Well, so the situation with the scepter, with the Mind Stone and the Space Stone, when you think about what happens at the very end of Avengers when you see him for the first time and the others there with him, and he says, these human defenders, these Avengers are not the wretches that we were promised.
Mm-hmm.
To go up against them is to court death. And he, turns around and he smiles, and you start to realize what's going on. I wonder if part of what he did with the scepter and having already had the Mind Stone and going after the Space Stone, I wonder if part of it wasn't necessarily, I need to do this to attain these things, so much as I'm going to set up a scenario to test how good these heroes are, how effective these heroes are, so I know what I have to do when I go up against them myself, because at the end of Avengers 2, when you see him with the gauntlet, he makes that comment about, okay, I'll go ahead and do all this myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes good sense, especially, when you consider that like the concentration of the stones that were on Earth at the time.
Right, yeah.
Right? If he goes there first and fails, right, that's, it's easier for him to pick off the one-offs elsewhere and then bring, his own bevy of stones to the table to try to fight them. Yeah, that makes good sense.
And to make sure that he succeeds.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. But I mean, speaking of one-off stones, I really wanted to see him decimate Xandar and take the stone. I mean, I know that they did what they did because of time and all of that, but I actually went back and read the prequel comic for the film, expecting to see the decimation of Xandar in the prequel comic, and it's not even there. It's like they're just giving it to us as a given, and they're not even going to show it to us.
Interesting.
That is annoying.
Very.
There's this really cool thing that happened. Just believe us.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about what we sort of expect to see moving forward. And let's maybe do just a little bit of speculation about Captain Marvel, because obviously that's the big thing that happens at the end of the end credits scene, is that Fury summons or does something that has to do with Captain Marvel. What we do know about the Captain Marvel film is that it's going to be set in the 90s and that the Skrulls are going to be involved. And I would absolutely love it if we, sort of solve the whole Thanos deal, but then it sort of sets up a Secret Invasion adaptation. I think that would be absolutely amazing.
John, I'm right there with you. I think you and I have talked about that a little bit offline in the past, but yes.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense that would be the next big event that they've been building to. But do you guys think that they would do Secret Invasion in the same way that they did Infinity Gauntlet? Like, we're kind of going to get a reset, I think, of the MCU to some degree and the Avengers team. And then we'll have some new individual movies and then maybe one or two Avengers movies before we actually get to the Secret Invasion.
Yeah, it's hard to say because, I mean, you could sort of play it either way, right? Like, you could sort of build it up with this, kind of slow burn, which they did very effectively in the comics. Or you could have it be something that like is a big deal like right away, and then have the implications of that sort of resonate out into the larger sort of collection of films for however long you kind of want to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the material is there to do the slow burn, and I'm worried just that if we go, if the next Avengers movie wraps up in the Thanos storyline and kind of launches the Secret Invasion, and then we have maybe another 2 years of individual movies in between, and then we get Secret Invasion right away. I'm just worried that it'll rush too much of that stuff, and we won't get all the good character moments and the individual stuff that we can build towards.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's a valid concern. Yeah.
What do you guys think the balance is between wanting to give it the time it deserves to get where it needs to go, like they've done this time around, where we're on our 19th film?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the balance is between that and giving the breathing room that's needed, but also not wanting to essentially have audiences run out of patience and essentially running into possible like superhero